Well, if you've been driving on any Indiana roads lately, whether urban or interstates or rural, you're probably noticing an orange cone here and there and lots of road construction in Indiana. Well, welcome. Guess what, folks? It's summertime, so that's what they do. They work on the roads. So, Joyce, talk about road construction and wheel taxes and everything else that has something to do with the wonderful world of road construction is Brian Gould. Brian is the head of the Build Indiana Council. Brian, my friend, thank you very much for being with us. Always good to chat with you, sir.
Absolutely. Abdul, appreciate you reaching out and connecting. Certainly a lot of things happening here in the Hoosier State and the crossroads of America in regards to infrastructure funding, gas tax suspensions, how we're going to pay for the future, and all patiently waiting to see if the Chicago Bears are coming or not.
Well, I can probably tell you that Chicago Bears probably aren't going to come. That's my Chicago. Indiana's getting played. So
That's a very possible case. We'll see.
all right. Well, let's talk about first of all, let's talk about Indiana's roads and the road condition right now because we
Yeah.
always hear people complaining, about crappy roads, I-70, potholes.
Yep.
Even though the potholes are more of a climate thing than anything else. But how are Indiana's roads on a scale of 1 to 10? How would you rate Indiana's roads?
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of progress over the last decade since the last time the state of Indiana passed a significant infrastructure bill. We've seen the percentage of roads that are in fair or better condition continue to improve over the last 10 years. I would tell you our overall infrastructure continues to get really high marks nationally from entities like CNBC, saying Indiana has one of the best infrastructure networks in the country. And I think you see that with economic development that's happening here in Indiana. We continue to draw in businesses that want to locate here, that want to manufacture and ship their goods out of here, primarily because of the position we're in, not just geographically, but also our state continues to make these wise investments. But to that point, when we see some of the things that have occurred this summer with suspension of the gas taxes, we know we were already in about $1 billion shortfall for infrastructure needs. You add another billion in lost revenue from gas tax suspensions, certainly starts to raise some concerns, not just from the construction industry, but also Hoosiers. We've been seeing more and more of that in the media the last couple of weeks when we talk about further extension of the gas tax. And we're even hearing from everyday Hoosiers now, they're saying, well, that's great, but what about our roads? What about that bridge that needs replaced, that intersection that's horribly congested? So I think even everyday Hoosiers are starting to question, are we going to be able to keep up the level of effort we've had over the last 10 years? It's a great question.
And not to mention the wheel taxes are seem to be all the new thing these days. Indianapolis City County Council just overrode a
Yep.
mayor veto the other night as we record this conversation to implement a wheel tax. I know other counties have implemented wheel taxes. Indianapolis is a little bit of a different creature because it's a consolidated county and
Right.
its road structure. But I always tell people the roads have to be paid for.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the piece that we sometimes lose sight of. And generally, it doesn't draw a lot of attention until gas prices go up. Then people start to question, well, how much are we paying in taxes on this? Well, the one thing is with the gas tax, yes, it went up a penny on July, but other than that, the gas tax never fluctuated. The price of gas went up because gas was more expensive. So we understand that. Now, the sales tax on gas, yes, it's 7%, just like on if you were to go buy a new pair of shoes, you pay 7% sales tax. Yes, that depends on the price of the product you're buying. But to that point, yeah, it's expensive to fix the infrastructure that we have out there. We've got a pretty big gap. We're trying to figure out how we bridge that gap so we don't face a cliff. And at the same time, cost of projects keep going up as well. We are thankfully not seeing what we saw in 2022 and 2023, where we had inflation in the construction industry greater than 35%. Now, we're still trending almost double what our traditional industry average is. We're now 4.5 to 5%. So yeah, cost of projects are going up. And especially here in the Indianapolis area, we know there is at least $500 million a year gap in what the city really truly needs. It's likely even closer to $1 billion. The city of Indianapolis took a big step last night in passing and overriding the mayor's veto on that wheel tax. You mentioned it. We're seeing more and more communities Carmel, Greenwood, Evansville, now Indianapolis, that have passed municipal wheel taxes. And I think it was a really wise decision because if there's one thing that was made clear by state legislators over the last couple years, it was we want to see you help yourselves. We want you to have a little more skin in the game. Use the tools and resources we've provided for you before you come back and ask us to do more. And
We're,
that was certainly the case that Speaker Houston and other leadership made to Mayor Hogsett was it's time for Indianapolis to do something, and we'll be there to match you one for one.
we're talking this afternoon to Brian Gould. Brian is the executive director of Build Indiana Council. They had a news conference on Tuesday this week discussing Indiana's gas tax suspension and dedicated funding mechanisms needed to support the ongoing vitality of roads and bridges in Indiana. And it's also in the context, too, what the City County Council did this week, which was overrode the mayor's veto on the wheel tax, what other communities have done as well. Brian, not to get all philosophical here, but why do you think people have a problem with taxes for roads? Because I could see, maybe because the one thing I always hear is, well, why do we give this money to these people, we should be spending it on roads and bridges? I've been dealing with people on Facebook, which I don't know why I do this to get my blood pressure. My doctor tells me it's bad for me. I need to quit. Is when I see somebody say something on social media, well, if they got money for this, they got $1 billion budget. Why can't they take 10 million from here and move it over here? Which I don't have time to explain government finance 098.
Right,
It's a
right.
remedial class, not 101.
Yeah. So, I think one thing that our industry is very mindful of is nobody wants to pay more for anything right now, whether it's at the pump, at the grocery store, their property tax bill, their income taxes. Affordability is certainly at the very top of mind of every single household. It's at the top of mind for both Republicans and Democrats right now. So it's certainly difficult when we have to come back and say, look, what we're doing isn't enough to stay ahead of the curve. In past, when we have advocated for infrastructure funding plans, it's really been to take care of what we have, finish the projects we've started, and we traditionally have said if there needs to be something new, then that's another conversation. We need to figure out how we do that in the future. We've completed I-69. We've done a great job of maintaining the network that we have right now. There's this bigger demand, a bigger push that everybody has a project they want. The Ohio River Bridge in Evansville, Mid-States Corridor in South Central Indiana, I-65 and I-70 getting completely reconstructed to 6 lanes, US 30 in Northern Indiana. I could go on and on. We have significant necessary projects all over the state that we now need to come back to the table and figure out how do we do this. I don't think a lot of them are in question that they will be an economic driver. They will continue to attract companies to bring jobs to Indiana, to manufacture goods and to transport those goods out of Indiana. The question is now, our current model we have that takes care of what we have is not designed to fund these mega projects in the future. We need to go back to the toolbox, figure out how we diversify our revenue stream a little bit. Because I'll tell you this, Indiana is probably one of the top 5 states in the country for our dependency on fuel taxes. That's just the funding formula we have set up at this time is we collect from the pump, and we've made that promise and guarantee to those that fill up at the pump. Every single penny is going to go into road construction. Well, that's great. Now, at the same time, when gas prices trend where they're at now and people don't want to pay more, we've got to go back and look and see what other options are out there.
We're talking this afternoon to Brian Gould. Brian is with the Indiana Builders Council, as well as a bunch of other organizations that had a news conference earlier today, as we record this conversation on Tuesday, talking about the gas tax suspension, dedicated funding mechanisms, et cetera. Brian, I want to get your thoughts on this, because I remember this conversation came up a few years ago when Governor Holcomb asked for an increase in the gas tax, and he got it, and much to the dismay of some folks. But the thing is, the problem with using fuel tax as a way to pay for roads infrastructure is as cars get better mileage and more fuel efficiency and electric vehicles and the whole 9 yards, that's less fuel tax money coming in and more cars on the road. And so roads get more wear and tear.
Absolutely. That's that was the conversation we had a decade ago, and everyone thought, well, hybrid and all electric cars are going to overtake this really quickly. So, state did make an early move and it was a leader across the country in adopting EV and hybrid fees on vehicles. We've really kind of seen that type of vehicle start to plateau in consumer sales. Now, the bigger issue to your point is a new Toyota Camry coming off the line is getting 35 miles per gallon when a decade ago it was 27, maybe 28. So, yeah, cars are able to drive further, consume less fuel, which means less revenue coming into the system. At the same time, prices for these projects continue to rise. We've had a very good system in place. It's a very low administrative cost to implement gas taxes and sales tax on gas. Consumers typically don't even really understand how much they're paying into the system. And it has allowed Indiana to move in a cash fund basis. We're not taking out debt like a lot of other states have done to pay for projects. We collect the cash. Those fees are then turned around typically within 45 to 60 days back out to local units of government, to the state, to go pay for projects so people can see it immediately. There is a concern as we move forward. As much as we appreciate the governor, legislative leadership has said we have a plan in place to backfill the state for this 600 million to $1 billion loss in revenue. It's great the state's in a really good fiscal position to do this, but we do have a concern if that tends to lean towards this might be the new policy. We have always operated in our own silo of user fees collected at the pump, vehicle registration fees, tolling collected, and been able to say these are dollars that the users are paying for. We're not asking folks, we're not asking, the elderly who only drive 2,000 miles to bear the burden of this on property taxes or income taxes. It's the users that pay for it. So that's the big thing, I think, is we look to the future. How do we establish and have a long-term sustainable funding plan that continues to say, if you use it, you pay?
And it's interesting, Brian, you bring that up because obviously, as we look at our roads and our infrastructure, there's been talk about turning I-70 into a toll road. That's got to get some federal approval
Right.
and some other issues in there. Then we talk
Yep.
about tolling I-65. And there's also been conversation about, okay, since we can't necessarily use gas taxes anymore, like little transponders in your car. So maybe every time you go renew your license plate or renew your registration, they basically take the odometer reading and you fill that out. What are some of the other ways people are looking at to pay for our roads and our infrastructure? But it's still got to be palatable to the taxpayers.
Right, absolutely. I think we closely watch what other states, both Republican and Democrat states, are doing right now, because Indiana's not the only one that's in this position. There are a lot of states that have increased their dependency on fuel taxes to pay for roads. Now they're trying to figure out, where do we go from here? We've seen a handful of states that have looked at trying to do like a vehicle miles traveled, offering that in both a, yes, we'll put a transponder in your vehicle, and then other options of just pay an average mileage rate. We're not going to track your car. We're not going to ask you to report your mileage. We've seen other states that have done things like that. There are still a handful of states that have not acted on EV and hybrid fees. So I would tell you, this is one of those areas, maybe not in a lot, but this is one of those areas where Indiana tends to be a leader. Other states are kind of following to see what we do. I would tell you also, in conversation with legislative leadership, yes, I think there's an agreement. We need to address the shortfall in funding this year. We need to look at our substantial reserves we have. But we also always have the conversation of how can we live within our means? There are user fees and taxes being collected from everyday Hoosiers and drivers that aren't dedicated to roads yet. I would tell you the big one is sales tax on vehicles. My wife just bought a new car last month. We paid 7% sales tax on that vehicle, and that goes to the state general fund. I think that's something we could look at into the future to say, if you're buying a car, we know what you're doing with it. You're paying a tax to the government for that vehicle. We know where we know you're gonna drive it on the roads. If the government's collecting that, it should go to the government service. So that's one of the things we're looking at. I think Also, I'd tell you recently, the General Assembly has kind of opened up the toolbox to give NDOT a little more flexibility to enter into public-private partnerships, tolling the interstates, bonding when we have a revenue stream attached to it is something they are open-minded to. They've made it clear they're pretty close-minded right now to any future gas tax increases, fees increases, or just outright bonding. I think we hear that from a lot of folks that the idea of opening up a credit card and taking and using the state's AAA credit rating to go bond $6 billion worth of road projects is not the type of thing they're wanting to do. So we'll continue to be open-minded. We'll continue to offer options and our thoughts on this and see where we go come January.
Brian, and it's interesting because obviously there's a state surplus right now, a very healthy surplus. But I always remind people you don't want to use surpluses for ongoing. You use it for one-time expenditures, not necessarily for ongoing, for not for ongoing expenditures, because you're just going to cause yourself a whole world of hurt down the road.
Right. And the other thing with that, Abdul, is look, we're very understanding of this that when it comes to road construction and projects the state needs, if we have to go compete for general fund dollars against healthcare, education, childcare, more often than not, road construction takes the back seat to those priorities. And I would tell you, yes, those are very significant priorities. We've heard there's obviously a continued focus on Medicaid and increasing expenses there. The governor and legislators would like to do more on childcare. The cost of K through 12 education continues to go up every single year. So that's why we like to be kind of in our own silo and continue to focus on user fees. But that being said, hey, when the bucket is open and we're told this may be an option to backfill and make NDOT whole, obviously we're going to work with our partners in the State House to see what we can do.
And it's interesting too, my friend. Let's say just once again looking at the road funding issue, the big question for me has always been who pays for the road? Is it the state that pays for the road? Is the county that pays for the road? Is it the city that pays for who pays for that gravel? Who pays for that shortcut I take from the west side of Indianapolis to Court and Danville? It's a lot of sort of backcountry roads. Who pays for all this stuff?
Right. And the answer is it's Hoosiers and it's out of state motorists that we're able to collect from. Yes, we've got interstates and state highways that are maintained by the Indiana Department of Transportation. You've got your county roads and bridges maintained by counties at the local level. You've got your municipal and more rural cities. And yes, those dollars are all broken out. But the truth is, the dollars, even as they get distributed out, all come from the same entity, and that's the user that we're collecting from. I think one thing I really hope folks keep in mind is fuel taxes are one of the very few mechanisms we have in the state of Indiana to collect from folks that aren't Hoosiers. When it comes to property taxes, you own property here in Indiana, more than likely you're a Hoosier company or a resident of Indiana. Income taxes, absolutely. You're a company based here or an individual that's working here and living here. Fuel taxes and also tolling, we've got in northern Indiana and the Ohio River Bridge in Louisville. That's an opportunity for us to lessen the burden on everyday Hoosiers, collect from the folks that are actually using it. I give the example sometimes, let's say the city of Westfield, for example, it's the residents that are paying for the police, fire, protection, ambulance services, the government services happening there. There are a lot of folks from outside of Westfield that benefit from those services. It's not that different than our transportation infrastructure network here in Indiana. There are a lot of companies, a lot of individuals that benefit from the network we have. It's fair that they pay into it.
Brian Gould with us, the Build Indiana Council, talking about roads and transportation, thanking Governor Braun for a pause in the sales tax, but also asking for sustainable road funding because we can't keep doing business, folks, the way that we're doing business right now. Brian, what have other states done to alleviate their road funding issues to the best of their ability? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, we've seen there are a handful of other states right now that have looked at fuel tax suspension. So there are a couple others that are going through this. Indiana has implemented it earlier than most others, and it looks like we're going to keep it in place longer than most others. But
Until the lawsuit gets filed, but that's a whole other story for a
that's
whole other
right. That's
time.
right. Exactly. But no, I think we see a lot of other states right now that are looking to really at the bonding option, and using bonding and debt capacity to be able to get construction done. And then actually, a lot of states are starting to look at, once they get the work done, privatizing the road, implementing a toll. You go to the private sector, who then is a concessionaire on it. They operate the tollway. The state still benefits because, one, you take it off the books, so the state's no longer responsible for everyday maintenance, operations, repairs. And then the state still gets the leasing, the ability to lease that infrastructure and get a revenue mechanism off of it. We've run this model in northern Indiana on the toll road up north for more than a decade now. It was probably one of Mitch Daniels' legacy pieces, was leasing the toll road and creating major moves, and then using those dollars and using the earnings off of that fund to pay for projects like I-69. We've now got a little savings account set up if the Chicago Bears decide to come to Indiana. We've got $600 million set aside to pay for the infrastructure around that stadium. So I think a lot of states are trying to figure out some creative ways, things that are out of the box, that are going to be able to meet these billion-dollar needs.
Brian, is what makes Indiana so unique and so different than a lot of other states. Number one, it's a crossroads of America. You're within 8 hours drive of 80% of the population, but also because of the weather here, the freezing,
Yep.
in the northern part, the rain and snow and ice in the southern part, and just you don't like the weather in Indiana. Wait 5 minutes, it'll
That's
change
right.
on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make our roads a little bit more, maybe a little bit more difficult to maintain and uphold, as opposed to if you're out in Las Vegas, where it's just all desert and gambling and a bunch of other brothel stuff that I don't talk about on the radio because my wife will kill me if I do.
Certainly no. I think you hit the nail on the head there, that very diverse weather patterns here in Indiana. You may be in northern Indiana getting 20 inches of snow, and you're in southern Indiana, you could still be golfing on the same day. But to your point, yeah, the freeze thaw cycle here in Indiana, I-70, and if you split the state down the middle, we get very different weather patterns. South of Indianapolis, it's very regular occurrence to get a lot of ice. You get up north, you get the lake effect snow. But it certainly does do a lot more wear and tear on the roads and bridges here. We have to use salt at a higher level than a lot of other states, which also can just kind of continue to wear down road surfaces and the concrete on the bridges. That's something we've just kind of continued to battle through. Our industry is consistently working to provide better quality materials, aggregate, the inputs. I get asked pretty often, when are we going to build a road that's going to last forever? I would tell you, is it possible? No, we're pretty darn close if folks are willing to pay for that. But it's
Or do what they did back in ancient Rome. We'll take your land and leave you. You get to keep your head, and we'll
yeah,
build a road
exactly
that'll last
right.
for 2,000 years.
Right, right, exactly. So it's a balancing act of trying to figure out priorities of projects. How much do you want to spend? We can build a bridge that will last for 30 years, or we can build a bridge that lasts for 60 years. Just there's a cost difference. When they've got to tighten up the belt, then we see the scope of projects sometimes is a little less. When they've got a little more funding available for a project, sometimes we see they want a higher quality steel, they want a higher quality concrete. We build it to higher spec demands. So it's just certainly a balancing act.
Brian Gold with us for a few more minutes on the program today. Talk about roads, infrastructure, the Build Indiana Council. Brian, another thing too, I always kind of wondered about Indiana and its roads is how do we determine road funding? Is it lane miles? Is it highway miles? A little ridiculous that a little small town out near the border gets more money per lane than the city of Indianapolis, which is basically the economic heart of the state of Indiana.
Yeah, great question, because that is certainly something I think there's a very small group of people that actually understand how the road funding formula works, how the dollars are distributed to both NDOT and then down to the local level for our cities, towns, and counties. So you're exactly right. There's a rather complex formula that we use: population,
That's
lane
a very polite
mileage.
way to put it.
I think Senator Kinley used to refer to it as the rat maze.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are a lot of different factors that go into account for how those dollars are distributed. I think the city of Indianapolis over the last couple of years certainly made their case that the current model just doesn't work, especially for a large metropolitan area like Indianapolis, for a variety of reasons. One, I would tell you, if we're going to do a mile of road work in Indianapolis, it is probably 4 to 5 times more expensive than anywhere else in the state because one, we have to build it to a higher spec because we've got bike lanes, parking lanes, we've got buses, heavy equipment that drives here in Indianapolis. We also have a lot of utilities. That's another big challenge on these projects is when you want to just do a simple reconstruction on a road, but now you've got to deal with addressing water lines, gas lines, telecom lines. Certainly just makes projects more expensive. I was encouraged to see the Indiana General Assembly in 2025 heard the city of Indianapolis. They took action. They modified the community crossings program to say, look, well, we understand this model doesn't work really well for everyone. So we're going to open up community crossings and we're going to continue to have $100 million a year for a grant program. But anything in excess of that, we're going to shift into this direct distribution formula. If a city, town, or county has adopted a municipal wheel tax or a county wheel tax, they're eligible for that distribution. That was the real incentive for the city of Indianapolis to pass the wheel tax. Yes, the upfront $50 million match, but the other piece is now dollars will flow through community crossings in that direct distribution. So where we saw Indianapolis was in the past, maybe getting $1 million a year in that program, which is a drop in the bucket for them. Now the expectation is they'll start to see 10, 15, 20, 25 million a year flowing through that formula. It's certainly a living organism. I feel like every legislative session we dabble in that a little bit to try and figure out how we can make some adjustments to help benefit larger metropolitan areas, to help benefit NDOT. It's certainly always up for debate.
Well, final question for you, Brian. What is the future of road funding in Indiana? If you had a crystal ball and had the perfect world, you could snap your fingers like Thanos and the Avengers Infinity Stones, what would the roads look like?
Well, if I was Thanos, Abdul, I think I'd probably have bigger priorities than road funding. But um, no, I think the future of Indiana, I think you will continue to see our state be a leader in the country for not just building, but maintaining and operating one of the best networks in the country. We have very strong supporters from the governor's office on down. Partners in both the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, that understand this is a basic fundamental principle of government. Um, Fire, police, education, Department of Defense, infrastructure, and maintaining our network is something everyone expects. When you back out of your driveway in the morning, whether you're headed to school, work, play, the expectation is you're going to have a safe, easy commute and your vehicle is not going to get torn up while you're doing that. So I think we'll continue to see our state partners, our local partners, continue to make this a priority for the state of Indiana. What the funding mechanism looks like at the end of this, that's still certainly very much up for debate. It's a very difficult decision. It's always easier, especially politically, to look at cutting costs, being more efficient, reducing fees and taxes. And that's certainly the climate we're living in right now. This is going to be a very difficult decision. It's going to take some intestinal fortitude. And we're going to have thoughtful policy leaders that continue to make this a priority for our state.
All right. Well, our guest on the program has been Brian Good, the Build Indiana Council. Thank the governor for his work in road funding and the whole 9 yards. So, Brian, my friend, as always, sir, thank you very much for being with us. Always good to chat with you.
Thanks, Abdul. I really appreciate it.